Several years ago, when I was 25, I lived with one of my best friends at the time of this story. Like most friendships, ours eventually started to dwindle as she was rarely ever home. This night, however, she ended up staying at our place and heading to bed early. I was a server at the time, so I stayed up pretty late, usually watching Let's Plays on YouTube and smoking pot. This night was no different than any other except for my neighbors. I'll go ahead and give you some background information on my house and my neighbors. We all had lived in a one-storied house that had 2 bedrooms and the kitchen facing my neighbors. However, my room was the size of a prison cell. It's only large enough to fit a bed, a small desk, and a few shelves. For reference, my neighbors were a younger couple living in a smaller mill house, and they were constantly coming to our door asking for handouts. Now, normally, I'd be happy to help out a neighbor, or anyone for that matter. But the problem was that they would come over and ask us for crazy stuff. One time, they even asked us to fill up an old Mountain Dew bottle with water because theirs got shut off. They would consistently be knocking at our door and asking us for help. If we didn't answer, I'd peek through the window to see them either jacking cigarette butts from the ashtray or pressing their eyeball against the people to see if they could spot us. I've met some strange people in my life, so I was used to people like this. Fast forward to around 11 p.m. There I was smoking and watching YouTube on my couch when I heard a knock at the front door. I rolled my eyes because I knew exactly who it was. I walk over to the door and check the people, and sure enough, the boyfriend was on my porch. Normally, I just walk away and continue on with my night. But he looked like he was in distress, and my car was out front, so they knew I was home. I opened the door to see what was up, and he greets me with a smile and says the following. I just wanted to come over here and see if you would film my engagement. I got my girlfriend a ring here in my pocket, and I need you to follow me into the backyard and film it for me. Baffled but curious, I told him congrats and said that I would be out in a second and I just needed to put my shoes on. I shut the door behind me and locked it and quickly ran to the back room that looked out into their backyard. I peeked through the blinds to see the setup. Nothing, just pitch black darkness. Naturally, I woke up my roommate and told her what was going on. Yeah, screw that, she said to me, and we both walked back up to the door after the boyfriend started banging on it. I looked through the peephole again, but I couldn't see anything and was confused all the way up until he pulled his eyeball away from the peephole. I quickly turned around and put my back up against the door. My roommate then came running back to the door from her room with 2 wire hangers for protection. We both clung onto the hangers and sat up against the door until he finally left. We were so freaked out, but we wanted to make sure we weren't overreacting, so we go out our back door and hopped into her car so we could do a drive-by. Slowly, we crept by in her car and peered into their living room. Sitting on the couch and staring at the wall was the couple and an older man. We sped off and ended up staying at a friend's house that night, and I never answered the door for either of them again. One day, I came home from work and an older lady was parked in their driveway. She walked up to me as I got out of my car and asked if I knew where the neighbors were. I told her I hadn't seen them for a while, and she informed me that she was the owner of the property and that they were months late on rent and finally came to evict them. She entered the home to find it completely trashed. Needles and garbage everywhere, holes in the walls, and graffiti everywhere. I told her I was sorry to hear that she had to deal with this all, but was happy that they were finally gone. I'm not 100% sure what was going on that night, but I'm glad I didn't follow them into the backyard. This happened to me when I was 17 years old at the time, and is by far the most horrifying thing that I've ever encountered. It was the summer of 2017, which meant that school had been out for a good 3 months. Even though most people thought of summer as the perfect annual vacation, my parents still made me find a summer job. As much as I didn't like their rule, I had to stick with it. I was living in a very small and secluded area at the time, so there weren't many openings around my town. The small band of jobs that were still hiring either denied my application or claimed that they weren't hiring anymore. Eventually, I ended up getting a job with my neighbor who had been living in my neighborhood for a few years now. Her name was Samantha, and she had been a resident in the area for well over 10 years. She was tall and wide and had long brown hair and wore pale makeup. She seemed nice, if anything a bit odd, but agreed to hire me to work around the house. It wasn't the best job, but she was willing to pay me substantially more money per hour than a regular job, probably because I was younger. All I had to do was go over to the house and clean up anything that was laying around. While it may have seemed easy enough, she had made a few rules that seemed a little odd to me. I didn't mind the majority of them, but one of the rules in particular was not to go down in the basement for any reason. What made it even more strange was that her basement door even had a sign on it and made it obvious she didn't want anybody down there. I wasn't the type of person to go into other people's business, but it was very sketchy to say the least. Samantha had left for work and told me that I could leave whenever I was done with everything. There really wasn't much around her house for me to clean, so I just started wiping down furniture to act like I was doing something productive. As I'm organizing a few things in her office, I walked past the basement door and take a good look at it and knew I had to do it. I didn't know what laid beyond that door, but curiosity got the best of me, and I decided that I wasn't leaving until I knew for sure. I ever so casually opened the door into the basement and was met with a blast of extremely cold air and sudden darkness. I felt around for the light switch, but wasn't able to. So I take out my phone and use my flashlight to light my way down the stairs. When I reached the bottom of the basement, I shined my light around the room and noticed what appeared to be chains on the floor and several drawings on the wall. Other than the chains lying on the floor, there really wasn't much in the basement other than the water heater and a few boxes. I then came to the conclusion that there wasn't anything in here, and I turn around to walk back up the stairs when I hear something fall over on the other side of the basement. Not hesitating, I turn on my flashlight and walk over to where I heard the noise. When I saw what it was, I really didn't know what to think. There were at least hundreds of small Legos scattered all over the concrete floor. But before I was able to leave, I heard the sound of a small child in the pitch-black basement. In the heat of the moment, I didn't know what I was feeling inside of me. I guess you could say I was too scared to even feel anything. I ran out of that basement and up the stairs and out of that house, not bothering to close the basement door. I walked all the way back to my house while trying to process as to what the hell just happened. When I got home, I took a nap and my phone was off. When I woke up, I turned it on, and to my shock, I received 20 plus text messages along with 6 voicemails that she had sent me over the past 2 hours. They were all just insane texts that ranged anywhere from, "Did you go into the basement?" to, "I told you to stay the hell away from there." Thankfully, she didn't know which house I lived in, so I didn't bother responding. I still don't know if what I heard in the basement was just all in my head or something completely paranormal. Either way, I sure as hell won't be going back to that house to find out. This story is told in the perspective of a female. A few years ago, I used to live in a relatively suburban neighborhood right outside of Houston. It wasn't a bad neighborhood, but it was one where you'd be in some hot water if you piss off the wrong person. Let's just say the people weren't my favorite. At the time, I had just gotten over a very long and toxic relationship with my abusive boyfriend over things that I won't go into. During the breakup, I had a daughter who was 7 at the time, and she came to live with me as I didn't want her in a dangerous environment. One day, I was outside on my front porch painting canvases with my daughter when I see someone approach us holding something wrapped in a plate. As they got closer, I began to realize that it was a boy, probably around 17 or 18, bringing cookies. He walks right up to us and introduced himself as Lewis, welcoming us to the neighborhood. I tell him thanks and that it was very sweet of him. I tell my daughter to continue painting while I spoke to Lewis about the area and seeing if he knew things that I didn't. Lewis was 19, who still lived with his parents and attended school not too far away from the neighborhood. We speak for about a good 20 minutes before finally telling him it was nice to meet him and to have a good day. After my conversation with Lewis, I started to think that maybe I was too soon to judge the people who lived around here. But as time progressed, I began to see the real Lewis. Every day, he would come by our house to check up on us and would even ask to say hi to my daughter at certain times. The more time went by, the weirder his unexpected encounters got. One morning, I was rolling out our garbage bins to the street as the truck would be coming that afternoon when I see Lewis walking around smoking. He sees me and starts walking over to me, to which I then quietly cuss to myself in annoyance. Trying not to be rude, I say hi, and he straight up asks me how I served time when I was deployed to Iraq. I'd like to note that I was ex-military, but had never disclosed this information to him as I kept it very personal to me and my family. In fact, I don't even think I told my ex about it. I give him a dirty look and briefly tell him about it and said that I did my country a great service. Not wanting to talk to him anymore, I walk back inside mad and a bit creeped out, wondering as to how he knew about that. I didn't bother telling my parents or going to confront him about it, as I felt as if that would make things worse. The next day, Lewis calls me wanting to speak with my daughter. I furiously cuss him out and I tell him that I don't want to hear from him again and to stay the hell away from her. Right then and there, I decided that it was time to break the monotony of this constant harassment. I go over to his house, knock on his door, and was greeted to what I assumed were both Lewis's parents. Without hesitation, I really let them have it, explaining the whole ordeal and told them that I better not see him again. But instead of showing remorse or sympathy, they almost acted like they didn't care and only gave a weak apology. Not wanting to feed the fire, I go back home and go to bed, trying to get rid of all the stress that was on me. I'd say I slept for a good 3 hours before being woken up by the loud sirens of a police car. I look out my window and, to my shock, I see 3 police officers handcuffing Lewis while placing him inside the cruiser. The reason as to why he was being arrested will forever stick with me in the back of my head. When I went to see what was going on, the police had some very disturbing news for me. Apparently, Lewis had taken several pictures of me and my daughter printed all over his wall taken from the inside of my house. One of them was a picture of my daughter, sleeping in her own bed. This took place back when I was in high school, when I was around 16. I lived with my grandparents at the time, as both my parents were divorced and my dad was living in another state while my mom lived by herself. Once in a while, she'd occasionally take me to go live with her for a week, but I stayed with my grandparents for most of the time. Every day, I had to take the bus to and from school as both my grandparents had worked and only had one car at the time. It was annoying having to take the bus, but I got used to it. One day, I came home from school and saw that the front door of the house was slightly open. Our front door was really heavy and would sometimes not close all the way if you didn't close it hard enough. I walk into the kitchen and I make myself a snack and go up to my room to work on some homework when I see someone in my grandma's room. My heart sank into the pit of my stomach as this man dressed in all black started ransacking my grandma's jewelry cases. Not wanting to cause any noise, I quietly go back downstairs and out the front door to call the police. For some strange reason, I don't remember feeling afraid or thinking the worst while on the phone. We live right near a police station, so it didn't take long for police to arrive to the house. When they did, 2 officers made me call my grandparents while the other 2 went into my house and came out with the man I saw in handcuffs. The officers brought him over to me and asked if I knew this man. After taking a closer look at him, I began to realize that he was our damn neighbor. Apparently, he had broken in while we were gone to go look for valuables. However, he didn't try to get away. He just cooperated with the police as if he knew he were gonna end up getting caught. My grandpa arrived soon after with my grandma not far behind, and went out to go get an alarm system later that week.